look back in hindsight, everything is 2020. In hindsight, we make mistakes, we're learning from it. In hindsight, yesterday and your tomorrow. In hindsight, it's so much clearer now.
Are you a business owner struggling to navigate the complexities of HR compliance and legal requirements? Well, look, I got a guy. Today on Hindsight the Podcast, I have Bryan Driscoll, a seasoned expert in HR and legal proficiency for your company's compliance. With nearly 2 decades of experience in employment law compliance, talent recruitment, and business operations, Bryan has helped countless entrepreneurs and small to medium-sized business owners steer through the legal intricacies of HR. How you doing, Bryan?
I'm well, Lee. Thank you for the intro. It's great to be here.
So I started off just talking to you a little bit about, HR. So when I think of HR, I think of, I equate it to the kid sitting in the classroom and you hear your name called over the loudspeaker in school, right? And you got to go see the principal. How is the relationship, just really quick, what type of relationship does HR have with the employee from your perspective, right? And what are some things, and I'm asking you this question because I genuinely want to know, like, what's a relationship employee to HR, right? And then we're going to back it up, do some hindsight, talk about a little bit about who you are, and how you got into this HR space. But if you could just set the tone and tell me, like, what should I be aware of as an employee? And then we'll talk about entrepreneurs and other things like that later.
Yeah, I would start by saying that it's evolving.
Okay.
So I would say, used to be right, and are still right in some companies and some industries today. But overall, the HR space has been evolving for the last couple of decades, and of course, the last few years, much more specifically. Mm-hmm. And it has become more of it used to be, as you were saying, sort of a business asset protection department, essentially, whereas now it is more focused on creating people-centric workplaces, which is, in my view, a good thing. Because the people are the oil in the business engine that keep everything running smoothly. And if they're not happy, if they're not engaged, if they're not productive, then the engine seizes up and stops operating. So that's sort of the short version is, it used to be the way you described it. It's still a work in progress without question. And there are some industries and some companies that are kind of lagging behind, others that are sort of on the forefront, pushing the boundaries of creating more people-centric workplaces. But it's an evolving space right now.
All right, awesome. It's good to know because I'm not always, I do have a good relationship with the people who work in HR, but ultimately you just want to know, like, to your point, to protect the company, or is it to be a value add or a valuable asset for the employee as well? It looks like it's trying to be both, so that's good. So before we jump into all this HR compliance and rules and regulations and things like that you're going to share with us, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into this HR space.
Sure. So the short version is about almost 20 years ago now, I was working at a small law firm and volunteered to sort of take over some of the business operations side of it. Really found that I enjoyed that more than the actual practice of law. And of course, it's very much related. There's a lot of regulations and laws that you have to know. And that it went from there. Then I went to work for a national staffing agency, managing their HR operations across all 50 states. And that's where I really honed my skills and really kind of became an HR nerd, enjoying the complexity of the laws across state lines, but also working toward developing, as I've said, people first, people-centric workplaces to really help those businesses grow and get to the next level.
Did you say you were a lawyer or you just worked in a law firm?
I was a lawyer for a few years. I don't practice anymore. And I worked in firms. I started working in firms actually when I was in high school, and then continued working until about, I think it was 2011, maybe 2012, something. Yeah, right around there is when I made the jump to just fully.
And was it something in you said you found it more appealing to you in the HR space? Like, was there an incident that made you make that commitment to shift the direction from practicing law to being an HR specialist?
I don't think there was any one event that was sort of the main catalyst for that jump. I think it was more of an internal passion of mine.
Okay.
I could help people more. Obviously, in the law, you can impact people's lives, of course, but I felt like I could have a stronger impact, more of a one-on-one micro level impact in the HR space.
So would you consider yourself as a person who likes to help people?
Yeah,
I asked
absolutely.
I asked that because I spoke to another guest and she kind of defined that as a through line, right? Or a life blueprint, right? It's just something that's inherent within yourself that you kind of gear in try to find a way to utilize that as a career or some sort of way to make money as well. And obviously the more money you make, the more people that you can help. So now we're going to jump into some of the HR compliance conversations, right? I'm not going to ask you great questions. So I'm going to need you to do a lot of the talking, tell me some interesting things, right? But I do want to know, what are some common misconceptions that entrepreneurs have about HR compliance?
One of the most common issues that I'm seeing, especially over the last 4 years, is related to remote work and specifically real small businesses, talking, less than 20 employees, and they're starting to hire across state lines. And they don't realize that they need to be compliant with those other states' laws. You may have been, let's use Texas as an example. You may have been based in Texas. You've got a handful of employees in Dallas. Now, let's be honest, Texas doesn't have a bunch of laws to protect employees.
Okay.
Now you hire somebody out of San Francisco.
Yeah.
Now you've got to be compliant. You've got to register with California. You've got to be compliant with the additional benefits and employee protections that California law provides. And it's fascinating to me, understandable, but fascinating to me, that so many small business owners that doesn't register for them. That's not something that crosses their mind of like, oh, this is something we need to do before we even onboard this new person. We need to make sure we have our compliance in place for this new state.
So how can small businesses ensure that they stay compliant with, you spoke to it earlier, ever evolving legal regulations?
It's hard. And it's, I mean, that's not to toot my own horn, but that's what I'm there for. That's how I help out, right. that is the space for people like me, because most small businesses don't have HR teams or even individual employees. Most times in those true small businesses, the office manager or the bookkeeper also does HR. And that's unfair to those people. That's not their expertise. That's not their lane. I get from a business budget perspective, it makes sense. But it can be a recipe for disaster because they're not keeping up on the laws. They're not keeping up on the changes. They don't have checklists of things that when you hire across state lines for the first time that you need to do. Yeah. So the best way to do it, honestly, is to partner with somebody that you trust. And that is the best way for real small business owners to ensure compliance, is to just partner with someone that you trust, because it's too much of a headache and too much work on your part,
right,
to keep up with all the changes.
Makes sense to me. Hey, think of a scenario, think of a story. You can change the names to protect the innocent, right? But can you share a memorable example where HR compliance or non-compliance played a crucial role, well, actually compliance, in saving a business from potential legal issues?
Yes, absolutely. Let me just redact this in my head real quick. So a company had many employees. They came to me several years ago, and they had over 100 employees, and they didn't have real policies and procedures in place. They didn't even have an HR department, let alone an individual employee. Like, they were just bootstrapping everything. They came to me and said, we want you to come in and help us build a handbook. We want to improve our culture and our engagement. They were a fully remote company. They had employees in, I think, 18 states plus three countries. Let me rephrase that. They didn't have employees. They had contractors.
Okay.
So here's So there's the problem, because everybody was working 40 hours a week. They had managers, they were told what to do, when to work. And so really they were all employees. This company of over 100 workers had only, I think at the time, a dozen or so W-2 employees on their payroll. Everybody else was an independent contractor. So it was misclassification just everywhere. And that was the biggest issue to fix. And it took about 12 months to get everybody sort of changed over, because there was a lot of negotiation that was happening when employees were being switched over, when workers were being switched over to W-2 employee. That is especially at that level, when you're talking nearly 100 misclassified workers, that is the potential to be a catastrophic financial burden for a company. And so that was a process that we had to go through to fix the issues. And it even took about a month of me raising alarm bells, like, this is the biggest issue, this is the biggest concern, before the company would finally came back to me and was like, okay, we get what you're saying now. This is okay, you're right. Like, yeah, we've been saving some money, we've been doing some pushing the lines a little bit, but it's time to make right on everything.
So what's the benefit of having a contractor versus designating them as an employee? From
the business perspective, it's less overhead. So a contractor, you don't have to pay benefits for. You don't have to pay payroll taxes. They are essentially their own entity, and so they're on the hook for Social Security, Medicare, for all the withholdings and all that. The benefit to, when done correctly, the benefit to the worker is that they get freedom, because one of the components of whether a worker is an employee or a contractor is how much control the employer has over the worker. And so if you tell me I've got to work 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, I'm an employee.
Right.
But if it's a true contractor relationship, then as long as I'm getting my work done, as long as we're having good communication and we're hitting milestones on whatever project we're working on, and I'm doing it my way on my time, then it's more likely a contractor relationship.
Okay. So now we're going to jump. I like that. I want to ask more questions about that, but I don't know what to ask. So what strategies do you recommend for small businesses to attract and retain top talent? And I know I jumped past a bunch of questions before we even start attracting top talent, but let's go there, and then I'll bring it back. I'll do some hindsight or some walking it back a bit.
Sure. So I think one of the most important things, I guess I would say there are two things, and they're absolutely related. One is to be compliant. Today, employees are much more knowledgeable about about employment laws in their state and their rights to certain benefits than what they used to be. It's much harder for employers to sort of throw one past employees and not provide them the benefits they're entitled to.
Right.
So being compliant helps with that. And then related is just having a positive culture. There are so many studies out recently that, yes, money is important. We live in a capitalist society. Everybody needs money. You got to be able to pay your bills. But beyond that, as long as you've checked that box, as long as you're paying people fairly, you don't have to be paying them the absolute highest they can possibly get anywhere, but you got to be paying them fairly and competitively. But once you've checked that box, then you can focus on the engagement, you can focus on the happiness, and you can focus on the overall culture, whether that's a fully remote culture, a hybrid culture, or an in-person culture. You focus on that, and that's what helps keep employees. It's the compensation that brings people in the door. It's the ancillary stuff that keeps them around.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So and I wanted to walk it back because I say top talent, but you think if you especially if you have a job or if you have a business that you can use a lot of remote workers, right? You feel that the pool is a lot bigger if you can pull from diverse or different places, You said different countries, different states. So my question to you is, I really want to know, so I trust you. Word of mouth, someone says, hey, he's tight, he knows what he's doing. I recommend that you hire him, at least, work him out, have a conversation, see what he can do for your business. What is the first thing that you do when you walk into a new opportunity to help a business with their HR compliances?
So the first thing that I do is I ask them, why'd you call me?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you need? What is it that you think you need?
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about that, and we look at things. And the other thing that I do, and it's a little bit more internal, it's a little bit more observational,
Mm-hmm.
is conduct a mental audit of like, okay, are these actually important things that we need to address? What other red flags am I seeing?
Mm-hmm.
Where else do I need to get my fingers to dive into to make sure that holistically, because that's what I try and provide, is a holistic approach to not only HR compliance, but HR in general, and employee engagement and business culture. Where else do we need to look? What else can we make better? And then triage, what are the most important things? Like misclassification, the example I gave earlier, that's a big one. That's something that's a red flag. Let's get on this immediately. Other things may not be as high priority, but they may still be on the list. So that's the first thing I do, is I figure out what it is that the business thinks that they need help with, what issues they need resolved. But I'm also looking internally for my own red flags, because I'm the expert. I'm the one that has been through this. I'm the one who sort of knows what to look at. And of course, I'm always looking at it. My gears are always turning as a lawyer. So I'm looking at things from a compliance perspective as well.
So I don't want you to put all your tricks out there, so I know you got a few of them. But what is like one thing that is surefire, that they're going to be out of compliance, and this is something they need to work on? So something like maybe the first thing that you look at, you kind of just know, or maybe you don't know, but you've seen it in a large percentage of the different businesses that you've worked with. What is something that you need to fix, or let them know that they need to fix?
I keep hitting on it, but honestly, it's a misclassification thing.
Misclassification.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah. It happens so frequently. And it's a serious issue. Not only from like an ethical perspective, but also from a legal perspective. It can be seriously financial drain for a business.
Wow. All right, good. I like it. You have said it about 4 times, I believe, maybe 3. So misclassification. All right, just pay attention, focus in on that now before you get Brian in the door, so you can surprise him and have everybody classified properly. But hey, so what role does employee-centric workforce play in driving business growth, especially in today's, we talked a little bit about a remote work environment?
Yeah. So one thing that I say a lot to people is, even if you are what I would describe as, I guess, a bad person, a bad business owner who cares nothing about your employees. You don't care about their happiness. You don't care if they're well compensated. You just don't care about them. All you care about is your ability to make money. Even if that is you should still care about your employees' happiness, because especially over the last 4 years, study after study has shown that happy employees make engaged employees, make productive employees, which does what? Makes businesses money. So even if that is you, even if you are a business owner that could not care less about your employee well-being and their happiness, you should still follow that path, because it leads you where you want to go.
That's a good tip. Happiness.
It is. I mean, it sounds like, I know I hear people in the workforce 20 years ago, 30 years ago saying, it's work. Why would I be happy? But that's part of the evolution of the workforce and HR more specifically, is that it matters now. Employees want that. Employees want that balance. And that meaning, and that's important. And if companies don't evolve with the workforce, they're going to be left behind.
Yeah, personally, I can agree with you. I know I always look for a good environment, good people. I did 20 plus years in the Army, And not saying that was always a happy environment, right? But it was very structured, right? And you were kind of good with the people that you work with, right? It becomes almost family like. And so coming out of that environment and going to the civilian workforce, my main thing was I was looking for a few things like teamwork, obviously looking to avoid backstabbing and things like that. But just, you can't really truly just see that type of stuff, right? You just kind of got to be in it and be aware of it. But I think a very good, clean, happy work environment is essential. And that's what I look for personally. I hear a lot of people say that that's what they look for as well. So all I'm saying is I agree with you, Brian. I think making sure that the employees are happy is a key component to retaining that talent, and then also growing that talent and growing your business and making money. So I definitely appreciate that feedback. So with all of that, could you share a success story where optimizing talent recruitment led to significant business successes or success?
Yeah, sure. So there was a company that I partnered with. It's probably been 6 or 7 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with them for a couple of years. They were the old school workforce,
Mm-hmm.
cubicles, just sort of mundane office work.
Okay.
And they were having trouble. I think at the time they had about 8 employees, so a real small business. They were having trouble keeping people. Like their average turnover over the past couple of years was just a few months. They had 2 key employees that were sort of like the nucleus of everything, and they had been there a while, and they were not going anywhere. But everybody else was kind of revolving. I came in and just shook some things up. Like, this was one place that wasn't misclassifying, so that was good. That was not an issue that needed to be resolved. They truly just had they had a lack of culture, is basically, I think, the best way to describe it.
Okay.
And they wanted to be much more tight knit. They wanted to be able to attract people. They wanted people to be aligned with their mission, but they had no alignment internally with that. So they had no branding. They had no process books. They had no onboarding. And that third one, that it was the one that ultimately we determined was the reason that turnover was so high. That people came in and had no idea what they were supposed to do.
The onboarding.
And and after a few months, they were just like, well, I'm just going to go someplace else.
Yeah.
So as you said earlier, it was the structure, like you said about the Army. It was ultimately structure that helped change the culture. And now they've had employees there they've now grown to about 20 employees when I parted ways with them. And they had much longer tenure with employees as they were coming in, because they were presented the first couple of days on the job and even before that, with job descriptions and interview processes, like employees felt comfortable and understood what they needed to do. And that was the key to changing the culture.
That is an amazing, I don't want to say observation, but here's the thing. I never really understood the true importance of a good onboarding procedure or process. I know people are getting hired. I know they're going to work in different sections, different departments, right? You know what the expectations are as a manager, but sometimes you don't always know specifically what they may be doing. I'll just say this in my own personal experience. So thankfully, and I won't say who, but the company that I work for, they have a very robust onboarding process with checklists and things you should do, tells you when you should check in, gives all this different, it just gives you a foolproof system to properly onboard new employees. If you're a hiring manager, or if you're in one of those positions where you're bringing new people into your team, make sure that you take that onboarding process very, very seriously, because it means everything to the people who are coming in. Okay, so that's my 3 cents right there on that one. So this is the part where we really want to listen to and focus in and let Brian guide us through this maze and this labyrinth of rules and regulations, but the very start. All right, here's the very start. What are some common legal pitfalls entrepreneurs should be aware of when setting up their business operations?
Right off the bat, registration.
Okay.
I'm actually working with somebody who's a brand new solo business, and they came to me basically just throwing their hands up saying, I don't even know what I need to do. Like, what certifications do I need? What licenses do I need? What registrations do I need? Do I have to register with the city and the state and the county? Do I just have to register with the county? Like, these are, I mean, it's mundane, and some of it is boring. A lot of it is boring, but it's necessary.
Right.
You have to set that up correctly. And then insurances with that, if you're going to have people coming into a physical location, you definitely need to have some sort of insurance coverages. There's so much that people just don't think about, and understandably, again, because people are excited to start their business. They're excited to start selling whatever they're selling and do the work that they're passionate about. They don't care about the registering with the state of New York. Like that's the boring stuff. That's the stuff they want to avoid. And that's where I can come in and help. Those are the most common things that is before day one. Those are things that you need to do, and so many people push that off for months.
All right, I'm gonna say it right now. I don't think HR is boring. We've been saying it, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit, Brian. You said, you know what you know. Like, I know that I want to go out and repair cars. I know that I want to go out and, get clients, sports clients, right? This is what I know. The HR part is, it's difficult. The compliances and all the regulations and rules and stuff like that is very interesting to you, right, Brian? Because you were a lawyer, so you took an interest in going through and doing all, reading and learning all the different regulations. And the crappy part about this is the one thing, the crappy part about this is that it's always changing. But the good part of it always changing is that it's always updating, right? Because you find different things where it's trying to take care of people, it's trying to take care of businesses. So you have to continue to update the rules and make those different allocations. But I just want to put it out there. I don't think it's boring. I just don't know about it. I just don't know about all the different rules. So it's always good to find someone like Brian who can help walk us through the things that we need to know, especially if they're glaring. And a lot of these things you walk in and it's things that are glaring. Like, you're misclassified 50% of your workforce, you're going to get fined. Things are going to happen bad for you. Let's talk, right? So tell me, what is it that you like about doing this, besides helping people, besides you were a lawyer and you like reading books and stuff like that? What makes you like the HR environment?
I like the micro impact that I can have.
Okay.
Just a couple weeks ago, I had someone reach out to me on LinkedIn that was an employee at a company that I stopped working with several years ago, but the company culture changed while I was there. We helped sort of reintroduce some employee engagement through different practices, including structure. And they reached out to me and said, since you're no longer involved, things have gone back to the way it was. Like, I didn't realize how much of an impact you had. And that is, to me, that's, if I can come into a company and I can help just that one person have a better experience there, then it's worth it. That is, to me, that's what I love about it. Yeah, I agree with you. To me, compliance is not boring. HR is not boring. I know most people find compliance boring, but it's in the Venn diagram of HR. There's these two bubbles, and one is compliance and one is employee engagement.
Right.
And they're very much overlap in that Venn diagram, but it's the employee engagement, the cultural aspects, where I really see HR shifting over the next few years, especially, not to overplay a topic, but especially with AI. It can take over some of the mundane aspects. It can help with some of that stuff. There's certainly some issues, and I urge caution certainly engage with it, but I certainly urge caution with businesses because there are some potential legal issues with the use of AI in different HR components. But that is where most people in HR like to live, is the employee engagement space.
Okay.
And that's why that's where I can have the impact, is I can come in and help with the compliance, the mundane stuff, and the internal team can really help facilitate a better culture, changes in employee engagement, and again, that it's all related to the compliance and to the structure.
So look, Brian, I asked as many questions as I could. So what I want you to do is there something that, not something, it can be multiple things, right? But is there something that I didn't ask you that you wanted to convey? You want to talk about your business and how it operates? We'll talk about how to get in touch with you, towards the end. But what did I miss? And I know I missed a lot, but what did I miss that you believe is very important that the listeners know about?
I think that we've touched on it. I don't think we've missed it. I think we've touched on it, but I think it bears repeating, and that is employee-centric workplaces are the future.
Mm-hmm.
We are seeing a shift in businesses, especially again the last 4 years, but more broadly over the past couple of decades, towards that people-first environment, because ultimately the question that business owners need to ask themselves is this decision that I'm making, is it in the best interest of the employees? And the reason that is a good question to ask is that most often, the vast majority of the time, if the answer to that question is yes, it's also in the best interest of the business. Of course, there are always business operational things, there are business finances that need to be considered. You can't offer everybody everything all the time. But in most cases, what's good for the employees will be good for the business's productivity and ultimately the bottom line.
Right. So where can people find out more about you, Brian, more about your business? And look, if you have a business, entrepreneurs, just a shout out, just a call to action, right? And you're a little questionable on your HR compliance, right? You know that you don't understand this stuff, right? And you know that you don't have anyone who's addressing it. Where is some place that they could find out more about you, Brian?
Yeah, so I'm not a big social media person, but you can definitely find me on LinkedIn, and I also have a website that's regularly updated. I write some blogs there. I think about once a week, roughly. I try to stick to a schedule to give people some updates on things that are changing. Those are the best ways to reach out to me. My email address is on the website too, so just shoot me an email. I'm always happy to talk to people. Try and figure out if there's a good fit for a partnership, for a relationship to come in and see if there's something that we can do to help. I generally work with people in sort of two different capacities, and they are, as everything in HR, they are very much related. A lot of times people come in and say, I need help with something. I have a project in mind. I need help with this. I need a handbook, or like we discussed a few minutes ago, I need to know how to register my business. I'm hiring somebody in a new state, or I'm brand new and I don't know what to do. And that then usually transitions to sort of the on-call, where we get things to a certain point. We basically get things on, from my perspective, on autopilot, where I have trained some internal staff to sort of be able to keep things moving in the right direction. But I'm always there, phone call, email, whatever, always there to help out with any issues that come up, any tough questions that you have. Like, recently there have been some layoffs, and companies call and say, how do we structure this? Here's the people that we're laying off. Are there any issues? Which there could potentially be discriminatory issues based on the classes of people that are being laid off. So it transitions sort of to almost an on-call doctor type of thing. You pick up the phone, you call me when there's an issue, when you have a question, anything compliance, HR related. I'm there to help.
Sounds good. All right, I'll put the web address and the LinkedIn in the show notes. Right. So you entrepreneurs out there, you don't have any excuse. All right. But thanks, Brian, for sharing your invaluable insights on HR and legal proficiency from your company's compliance. And look, Remember, understanding HR compliance is essential for business success, and Brian's expertise offers a guiding light through the complexities. Hint, hint, the solar eclipse. Stay tuned for more episodes focusing on life choices and their profound impacts. And to connect with Brian, just visit his website. All right, and I'll have it in the show notes. Thanks again, Brian.
Thank you, Lee. It was a pleasure.